2 years ago, shortly before dawn, Russian troops marched across the border in Ukraine. And Putin believed he could easily bend the will and break the resolve of the free people of Ukraine, that he could roll into Ukraine and he would roll over them. 2 years later, he remains wrong. He didn't do that. He wasn't able to do that. Kyiv is still standing. Ukraine is still free. And the people of Ukraine remain unbowed and unbroken in the face of Putin's vigorous onslaught. We can't walk away now. And that's what Putin is betting on. He's betting on we're going to walk away. That's why I'll be speaking to the G7 folks, so some of the heads of the European Union and NATO today. That's why I'm announcing more than 500 new sanctions in response. In response to Putin's brutal war of conquest, in response to Alexei Navalny's death, because make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Alexei's death.
What makes these sanctions any more effective than the hundreds announced before?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I just mentioned. So first of all, these sanctions are cumulative, so we have to look at it in that way. These are 500 new targeted sanctions that are now being sanctioned. The targets are being sanctioned for the first time, so that's important to note. These targets are within Russia's defense industrial base, its financial system, and it will continue to impose costs on Russia to make it harder to carry out its brutal war and vicious war in Ukraine. We will continue to make sure that we hold Putin's aggression accountable and raise the cost on his, on not just him, but also his enablers. The Department of Commerce is adding more than 90 companies to the entity list for their activities in support of Russia's defense, industrial base, and war effort. And the Department of State is designating 3 Russian individuals who were connected to Navalny's imprisonment and the Russian government's harsh treatment of him. The U.S. government has designated over 4,000 entities and individuals in response to Russia's war on Ukraine over the past 2 years, the strongest set of sanctions ever imposed on a major economy. And we will continue. We will continue to take actions to ensure Mr. Putin pays a steeper price for his aggression abroad, the repression at home. But we also, as I've stated, we need Congress to act. They need to do their job. They need to provide the assistance that Ukrainians need to continue to fight Putin's brutal war. That's what they need to do. They need to be able to make sure that we provide Ukrainians with the assistance to defend themselves. And so we are continuing to urge the Speaker. Again, if the Speaker were to put this on the floor, we would see a bipartisan support for the national security bill.
Well, I think this round of sanctions is interesting because they have sanctioned individuals and companies in third countries, so outside of Russia, in places like China, in Serbia. And so it's a signal to other international actors that there's a price to be paid for working with Russia to help them evade the sanctions. And it's also, I think, interesting to note that some of the sanctions appear to be aimed at squeezing out, or at least possibly squeezing out the dual use components that are going into the military munitions that Russia is, of course, constantly manufacturing. I think that for the administration, they had been working on this sanctions package to coincide with the second anniversary of the full frontal assault of Ukraine. And then, of course, the death of Navalny just gave them an additional impetus. I'm sure they were maybe already planning on sanctioning his jailers, but for sure they, if they had any question in their minds or if they had admitted those individuals, they're now on the list as well. Yeah, I mean, sanctions generally in and of themselves, they're not a silver bullet. Now, these sanctions, they're so, as you said, 500 different targets. So it may actually have a disruptive impact on the supply chain for the Russians. They're used to relying on all of these people and these entities, so they'll have to find and create new organizations. That also tells you that our sanctions regime has to be flexible and updated constantly. So I don't think this is going to change the game. The one thing that can really change the game is getting weapons to the Ukrainians immediately and getting them longer range artillery. That's the thing that will change this. I am hoping that the United States, that our government finds a way to also continue to clamp down on countries that are, or not even continue, to clamp down on countries that are circumventing our sanctions by buying oil and gas from Russia. I'm thinking now of India, which, basically provides, billions of rubles for the Russian government every year by buying Russian oil at a discounted price. There are many other countries, China, of course, as well, purchasing fuel from Russia and contributing to Russia's war machine in this way. We also purchase spent nuclear fuel from Russia that we use in our nuclear energy industry. I think we could also cut off, that's complicated, I know, but we could look at how we might cut off our reliance on Russian spent nuclear fuel. And same, of course, for our European allies who are also still purchasing nuclear fuel from Russia. I think that the other part that's missing here is diplomatic pressure, making Vladimir Putin a pariah internationally. We haven't done a good enough job with that part of this equation, if you will. And then I think putting pressure on Vladimir Putin to release the remaining Russian dissidents who are high level, like Alexei Navalny, and that includes Vladimir Kara-Murza, Ilya Yashin, and frankly, there are thousands of dissidents, but of course, these high level ones in particular, because their lives are at risk.
Two years after Russia's invasion, things here look bleak for Ukraine. Ukrainian forces are complaining of personnel shortages and ammunition shortages along the 1,000-kilometer front line, where they're mostly dug in defense, trying to hold territory as Russia eyes an advance. Mobilization issues have resulted in shortages in personnel across brigades. It's felt by all parts of Ukrainian forces. Brigades complain that they're only 75% staffed. That means that commanders can't rotate their soldiers in and out of really grueling battles on the position for longer than a few days. It means they're tired, get injured quicker, and are getting sick. The ammunition problems compound this. In order to economize shells, commanders are only able to fire at very precise targets while getting hit by Russians relentlessly in multiple positions as intense battles ensue there. Infantrymen don't feel confident that they have the protection from artillery, and it affects all parts of the fight on the Ukrainian side. Russia has also had some victories. Recently, they took the eastern city of Avdiivka after long battles there, and this was their second victory in the war after the long and bloody battle for Bakhmut. Ukraine has shown some success in the Black Sea. They've effectively used maritime drones to degrade Russia's Black Sea fleet. But in order to continue to do this, they need more long-range artillery, and this is what they're asking from their Western allies. But Western aid hasn't been as forthcoming. Kyiv breathed a sigh of relief when the EU finally approved 50 billion euros in aid after some resistance from Hungary. But this money is only meant to support Ukraine's economy and prepare it for EU membership. What Ukrainian officials are really waiting for right now is the military aid from the US, which is stuck in Congress. Until then, it's unclear what the future will be for Ukraine in this war, and a mood of gloom really hangs over the country because of this uncertainty.